Well, hi, and welcome to another LRCC Soundbite. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a man in the Bible who, well, effectively he wrote a diary of the big job that God gave him to do. His name was Nehemiah. So, maybe I should give you a bit of background to this story first, especially since it does in some ways relate to the stories I've told you over the last few weeks about the prophets called Elijah and Elisha, even though this story actually happens hundreds of years later. So Elijah in particular had difficulties in what he was doing because the king and the people were not following the laws that God had given them. At that time, things were happening. There was a drought for 3 years until there was something of a showdown between Elijah and the prophets from one of these false gods. Anyway, they sort of went through this cycle where the people would get it right, then get it wrong, then get it right, then get it wrong. And eventually they made such a mess of it that one of the things that God had told them would happen, happened. They were conquered. They were taken away from Israel. They were taken into exile. The people of Judah and Jerusalem, a lot of them went with the Babylonians, the Babylonian nation. Jerusalem was defeated. Its walls were torn down, its gates burned, and the city left in ruins. I don't know if you know the old Boney M song, By the Rivers of Babylon. It's a song from the Bible. It was written while the people were there in exile by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down and we remembered Zion. Zion, another name for Jerusalem. Anyway, around 400 years after that happened, some of the people started to return to Israel and back to Jerusalem. The city was in ruins still, but they started rebuilding houses and they started living there again. But it would be hard to call it a city by their definition at the time because it was defenceless. It offered no protection. It was just a collection of houses, really. Now, one day, a man who'd gone back to Jerusalem visited his brother who'd ended up in Persia. His brother was a man called Nehemiah. Now, when Nehemiah heard about the state of Jerusalem, he was really sad and wanted to do something about it. He also happened to be a trusted servant in the king of Persia's court. And when he turned up for work the next day, looking so sad, the king asked what was wrong. So Nehemiah, first thing he did was pray quietly and quickly, just prayed for help, and then asked the king to allow him to go back and repair the city. I think he was a bit surprised when the king said yes, but he didn't stop there. He then asked the king if he would give him letters to different governors to get their support as well as resources to help. And amazingly, the king granted all of this and sent him off. So Nehemiah arrived, he inspected the damage. It was bad. So he went to see the leaders who were there and told them what he believed God wanted him to do. And they said, what a great idea. And they went for it. Everybody got behind the project and they started building. The Bible has this great big long list of all the people involved and what each group of people built. It wasn't plain sailing. The nations around, when they saw this happening, they got worried because Jerusalem of old was a powerful city and they remembered how powerful it was and they were not sure this was going to be a good idea, but Nehemiah carried on. The workers had to carry swords in case they were attacked, but they kept going until everything was finished. The walls were built, the gates were back in place, the city was secure again. Now the story of Nehemiah kind of finishes with the people hearing the laws of God read to them again for the first time in hundreds of years. And they were sad. They were so sad because they realised how wrong they'd got it. But they resolved to do it right and worship and get God right and do things right, and they started worshipping God again and God blessed them. It's a great story, this one. It shows that when God asks you to take on a task, even if it seems completely impossible, you might actually find that he's lined everything up, and if you trust him and just go for it, amazing things happen. I know I've seemingly ended up involved in what seemed like mad ideas, but when I look back with God's help, I've always got through and somehow we've succeeded. God's not let me down yet, and I know he won't. So if you're a Christian, let me encourage you to take God at his word. See what might happen. If you're not a Christian, let me tell you that this life can be a bit of a roller coaster where you never quite know what's coming next. But it's in a good way. If that sounds like something exciting and you'd like to know more about it, then do get in touch. I've got so many stories I could share with you. God bless you. I'll see you next time.